To receive weekly mailings of Rabbi Mansour's tapes or to sponsor a tape, call 718-375-1023. To hear Rabbi Mansour's daily halakha or to search the Rabbi's database of halachot, visit www.dailyhalacha.com. That's DAILYHALACHA.com. And now, Rav Mansour.
Beruchim Abayim Rabotai. We're studying tonight Parashat Shemini. Towards the middle and the end of the Parashah, we are introduced from the most important laws in the entire Torah, the laws of Kashrut, where the Torah talks about the kosher animals and their signs, the kosher fish and their signs, different birds and their kosher signs, and different bugs and insects that the Torah forbids us to eat. Basically the topic of kashrut, which is a great part of our religion, the laws of being kosher. Before we begin our discussion on kashrut, which is again from the most important topics, Jews are synonymous with kosher. That's from the most pronounced of the 613 mitzvot. Not everybody knows, in the world at least, that Jews don't wear shatnez, wool and linen mixtures, nor do they know the laws of orla or kema hadash or yashan. But it's well known throughout the world, even the Gentile world, that the Jews have a special dietary law called the kosher laws. And Parashat Shemini is where most of these laws are learned from. Whenever I read this parashah, I get so excited from one fact that stands out, and I must repeat it from year to year because my excitement hasn't worn off. And you'll forgive me, and I know most of you know this already, but it's that amazing. The Torah enlisting the different animals that are not kosher, the Torah lists 4 animals specifically. The Torah lists the gamal, which is the camel, the shafan, which in English they interpreted as the hyrax, and the arnevet. Arnevet is the rabbit, and then the hazir, which is the pig. The camel, the hyrax, and the rabbit, says the Torah, has one of the 2 kosher signs. It chews its cud, but it does not have split hooves. The pig, on the other hand, has split hooves, but it doesn't chew its cud. Hakamim tell us that these are the only animals that have one out of the 2 kosher signs. Every other animal in the world either has both signs or has none of the signs. Now, to me, I find that amazing. The Torah was written 5,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago when we got it. It was given in the Midbar to make such a bold statement that these are the only animals that have one of the signs, to the extent the Gemara in Hulin writes that if a person is in the desert and he finds an animal and he's not able to tell if it chews its cud or not, because let's say the teeth or the mouth of the animal is deformed, so he's not able to tell if it chews its cud, he should look at the feet of the animal. If he sees the hooves are split and he knows what a pig looks like and it's not a pig, he can eat it. Again, you hear what the Gemara is telling you. We're so certain that the pig is the only animal in the world that has split hooves and doesn't chew its cud, that Hakamim will allow somebody that sees an animal and it does not look like a pig, but he's not sure that it chews its cud, but he sees split hooves, eat it. Because there's no other animal in the world that has one sign. Isn't that a proof to the veracity of our Torah? Isn't that a clear proof? Only God, who created all the animals, can make such a statement like that. They're finding animals every day. There's tens of thousands of different animals, whether it's in Africa, or whether it's in Kenya, or whether it's in the different remote areas of the world. To me, it's amazing. That means if some Bible critic, as we speak, is on an elephant in an African safari looking for that animal, all he has to do is produce an animal that has one of the kosher signs, and it's not one of the four that the Torah mentioned. All he has to do is find his one. And we'll take the whole Torah, we'll fold it up, and we'll put it in Genizah. That's how far the Torah is going out on the limb to say it's these and none others. And then when it comes to the fish, the Torah does the same thing. When it comes to the fish, the Torah gives us the two kosher signs, fins and scales. The Gemara, in another bold statement, says in Chulin that any fish that has scales automatically has fins. Now there are that have fins and not scales. But if it has scales, it's an automatic, it's going to have fins. That means if you go to the market and you see a fish and you don't see fins on them, maybe the fins were cut off, but you do see scales on them, rest assured it's kosher. Maybe there's a fish somewhere in the world that has scales without fins. Maybe there's a fish like that. Gemara says not impossible. Fact. If it has scales, it's automatically kosher because there are fins. Now again, there are, as we speak, Bible critics in submarines, 20,000 leagues under the sea, looking for that one fish that has scales without fins. And if they find it, again, we take the whole Torah and put it in Genizah. Because that's it. Torah cannot be true. If there's a mistake in the book, so the whole book is in question. It's 3,000 years later, they haven't come up with that fish. When Moshe Rabbeinu gave the Torah, he was a zoologist. He worked in an aquarium. He knew all the fish in the world. You ever go to the fish store and see how many different thousands of fish? You see the aquarium, how many tropical fish, how many different kinds of fish. To make such a statement like that, fact, there is no fish like that in the world. So the laws of kashrut are one of the most startling proofs that our Torah must be divine. If the Torah was written, God forbid, by human beings, no human being would have the audacity to make such a statement that can be disproven within a few months or years from when it was written. So as a side point, it's not our subject tonight to prove the veracity of the Torah, even though it's a worthwhile subject to go into. But as a side point, the laws of kashrut give us a great chizuk and encouragement on the fact that the Torah must be min hashamayim. However, tonight we focus on a pasuk at the end of the Parashat, when the Torah is closing up the topic. The Torah says, "Velo tetameu et nafshotechem bechol hasheret zarometz al haaretz." Do not defile yourself, do not contaminate yourself with all these non-kosher things. Ki ani Hashem ha'ma'aleh etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim. Because I am the God that elevates you and elevated you from the land of Egypt. V'item kedoshim ki kadosh ani. And therefore I want you to be holy because I am holy. All the rabbis are interested in this word, Hama'aleh etchem. I am God that elevates you from Egypt. It's a funny word. We're used to the word Ani Hashem Asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim. I took you out. Lehotzi. This is from the only times in the Torah that we hear the word God raised us out of Egypt. He elevated us out of Egypt. And the Mefarshim explain, Rashi brings it down clear, that through the laws of Kashrut, we see that God elevated the Jews in a different class of people, in a different stature, on a higher level. Indeed, we were raised. And therefore, since we are raised from all other people in the world, our diet must be different. Hama'aleh etchem. The Torah is telling you were upgraded. In Egypt, you were a human being. When you came out of Egypt, you're a Jew. It's a different creature. It's a different species. It's a different class of citizen. Although we look the same, although we might have the same bodily functions, and although this might sound prejudiced and racist and not politically correct, and if we said this on a college campus, they'd probably be rioting outside the class and picketing and throwing eggs at us. But this is not our theory. Again, we have no right to say such a thing. It would be arrogant if we would say such a thing about ourselves. It would be haughty. But God says in the Torah, Hama'aleh etchem. Fact, you're lucky. I elevated you when you came out of Egypt. And therefore, in your elevated status, I had to tell you certain things you can't eat. It's almost like a refined machine. If you think about it in terms of a good car, for example. A person has a fancy car, a nice sports car, expensive, so he maintains it with the best of fuel. And he doesn't use the inferior oil. He uses the best oil. And he makes sure that when he brings it in for service, it's only by the manufacturer, by the dealer that uses special parts. He's not going to use a generic part for an expensive make model car. The Jew, the Torah is telling us, is that special made car. That special made human being. And therefore he cannot eat what everybody else eats. In a gross machine, so you can eat lobsters and you can eat ham and you can eat all sorts of mixtures of milk and meat, and you can have octopus, and you can have all the other rodents and different types of unslaughtered animals, because the machine's a coarse machine, so it can tolerate it. But the Jew is a refined vessel. As somebody might argue and say it's to our detriment. Who has to be elevated? When we were sitting in coach class, we could eat everything. We could drink the wine and we could drink, or you get all the food. Now that they elevated us to first class, now we can't eat anything. Now we have to eat the meal mark. Now we have to eat the airplane food. So you say that's disadvantage. Now, I remind you, it's not easy being a first class passenger. You know, in England, you have the guards at Buckingham Palace in London, the Coldstream Guards. These guards come from the most aristocratic families in England. Chosen people to sought after privilege. And they don their red and black uniform and their huge bearskin hats with the strap underneath their chin. And they have the prestigious job of guarding the Queen of England. And if you ever saw them, it's a very difficult job to stand at attention without moving for 8-hour shifts at a time, in the sweltering heat in the summer and in the freezing cold in the winter. And some of them just pass out and nobody could move. And the shift is over, and they revive them and they take them away. But to them, it'd be much easier to put on a pair of jeans and a baseball hat and a cigarette and sneakers without socks and walk around the streets of London. But when you have an opportunity to protect the Queen of England, so although it's a higher class and although it might entail some inconveniences, but this is a respectable position. Of course you can play softball in the schoolyard and dress as you wish, or you could serve as one of the president's advisors. But to serve as an advisor, you have to wear a suit and tie every day and a starched shirt. Somebody says, I can't do that. That's too difficult. So always, whenever you see people on a higher level in society, they have more responsibility. It's not easy. There's a certain level that they must maintain, and there's a certain level of etiquette that they must maintain. Jews, as being the first-class passenger of the world, of this ma'ana, of this elevated state, yes, it's a great privilege, but with the privilege comes a certain mode of behavior. Tonight we discussed the diet. And we can't just go around saying, we're the chosen people and we're special and God loves us and Mashiach and Olam Haba and we have the monopoly to everything and everybody's going to serve us and we only want the good. So God says, fine, that's going to happen. This is true, but you have to follow the diet. Unfortunately, many people have more loyalty to Atkins' diet or to a diet that's made from Weight Watchers or all sorts, because everybody in the world's on some sort of diet. Whether it's a liquid diet, whether it's a protein diet, at every point in someone's life, you're working on another diet, either to lose weight, either to gain weight, either to do something, but everybody's concerned about their diet. Just go to the bookstore and see how many books there are in the book section on dieting. Tonight we offer you a diet that was tailor-made by God Himself. Now, who knows better how to service human beings than the manufacturer himself? And God who created man, it's no different than a Swiss watch. If a Swiss watch needs servicing, you're not going to send it to Seiko. You're going to send it to Switzerland because they know exactly what the watch is because they built it. They constructed it. God who constructed the human being, He knows exactly his makeup, both physical and spiritual, the makeup of the Jew specifically. So don't you think He's going to give a diet that is going to be consistent with the machine? Do you think He's going to tell us to eat things that would be detrimental to us? Certainly not. So therefore, the greatest dietitian, God Himself, in Parashat Shemini, offers us what is permissible and what is forbidden. I saw a fantastic Hatam Sofer today. It's in a few places. I find it amazing. Because we're talking over here theories. Jews are different, it's a different creature, it's a different species, upgraded, etc. But when you see it written in a Hatam Sofer, that's it. It gives it credibility. If somebody's listening and says, who says? Who made you the Aryan race? Lavdil, Has v'shalom. Hatam Sofer is discussing different medicines, and he comes out that just because a medicine was tried on Goyim, and it didn't work, and there was no success, and it was deemed a non-healing medicine, it's no proof that it won't work on Jews, he says. And therefore you can try it on the Jew. Because Jews are different. Don't ask me to prove it to you in the laboratory. I can't tell you that it's the intestines that are different, or it's the heart that's different, or it's the bloodstream. But he's telling you, there's Gemariyot that talk about this. The Gemara talks about a certain lady, a certain girl, Antoninus' granddaughter. She got pregnant at the age of 6. Says the Gemara Nida. So the Gemara has a question. What do you mean? But the rabbis thought that a lady cannot get pregnant before 12. So the Gemara says, yeah, we stand by our statement. She was like, oh yeah, what's one thing got to do with the other? We're talking about Jews. different creation, different world. That's the Ma'ala of the Hatam Sofer. Why is Kashrut so serious? Why do we make such a big deal out of it? There's a Gemara that repeats itself in many places in Shas. One place in Hulin, another time in Gittin. Gemara is talking about different rabbis that were thought to have eaten something that wasn't kosher. Gemara gives stories, and the Gemara says, oh, see, the rabbi ate something that's not kosher. And then the Gemara says, impossible. The Gemara is so astounded whenever they bring up a rabbi that ate something that wasn't kosher, and they say, Uma behimtam shel elu. And how could you say even the animals of these rabbis were careful in what they ate? They themselves, no kol sheken, or the more so. The Gemara says, what do you mean the animals were careful? The Gemara says the story of Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, that he had a donkey, and his donkey was a very religious donkey, and was very careful what it ate. And one time they were about to feed it some food, and they wouldn't eat. And they figured out why it didn't eat, because the food, they didn't take the tithes yet from the food. The food wasn't usar yet. So you see, if the animals of these rabbis were careful in kashrut, so the rabbis, lo kol sheken, the Gemara cannot accept that a rabbi of the Gemara would stumble in eating something not kosher. If the animals didn't stumble, what kind of fanatic animal is this over here? The Kiddusha of the Hakamim trickled down to the animals, where the animals had such a level where they were careful not to eat things that their masters would not be allowed to eat. So Tosafot asks a question on these Gemariyot. Tosafot asks, what's the Gemara getting all excited? We've seen rabbis in the Gemara that have made sins. Gemara Makot tells us of a rabbi called Yehuda ben Tabai that he once killed somebody unintentionally. And the Gemara lets him off the hook. The Gemara doesn't say, whoa, how could you say that? His animals. Gemara leaves him alone. There's another Gemara that talks about Rabbi Ishmael, that he once flickered a candle on Shabbat. He once turned on the lights. And the Gemara doesn't react. Gemara accepts that. But once it comes to a rabbi eating not kosher, the Gemara says, oh, we can't accept this. Hey, the animals didn't do it. How did the rabbi? Tosfot says, why, when it comes to eating something that's forbidden, the Gemara has such a reaction, and it can tolerate murder, and it can tolerate Hilul Shabbat? Tosfot's answer, Genai hu latzadik she'ochel davar asur. Because it's a genai. It's a great shame. It's a great wrong. We cannot accept that a tzaddik would eat something that's not kosher. That he can kill, it happens, mistakes. But such a gnai, such a negativity of something that's asur to eat, the Gemara says we will not tolerate it. Why? The pshat is because it becomes part of you. You've heard of the statement, you are what you eat. This is what Tosafot is saying. Tosafot's the first one to coin that. If a person is Mehalel Shabbat, okay, so the sin is over there. It's not part of him. His body doesn't become a piece of Hilul Shabbat. If a person murders somebody, his body doesn't become now a piece of Retzach. Or if he steals, it's not intrinsic in his body now. It doesn't become part of him. He stole from somebody. It's a big avon. But eating taref, it becomes part of you. That becomes your being. That means you are made up of Isur. You're a walking Isur. It's in your bloodstream. It's in your bones. It's in your cells. That's why taref is so great. Even the teshuvah for eating taref. How do you make teshuvah? It's not so easy. Start cutting off your fingers? We're going to start siphoning out all the taref that's in your blood. You're going to have to go through a special kosher dialysis. It's not an easy, it's part of your body. So the Gemara cannot accept that rabbis of the Gemara, that their bodies were made up of taref. That's how severe it is. You know, the Yehuda Hasid holds there's 4 laws in the Torah that you must give up your life for. We always know the 3. Avodah Zarah, Gilui Arayot, and Shefichut Damim. He adds a 4th to the list. He says, eating not kosher. If somebody comes and says, eat some shrimp or we're going to kill you, he says, you die for that. Die for kashrut. We don't follow that as halakha. And the fact that he can add it to the list shows you the immensity of the law. But it's got to be more than that. There's a law in Shulchan Aruch. The law says that a mother that's nursing a child, in certain situations, the nursing lady would be able to eat something that's not kosher. For health reasons or for whatever it might be. It does not render the milk not kosher. Mother's milk is always kosher. That's the rule. No matter where the mother's milk comes from. Even if the mother's goya, mother's milk is always kasher. Even if it comes from a non-Jewish lady, it might not be halav Yisrael, but it's kosher. The milk is kosher. And technically, therefore, a baby that wants to nurse from a midwife that's not Jewish, according to the halakha, kosher, not a problem. But the halakha advises not to do it. As the milk, bottom line, is a byproduct of not kosher food that's in our system. And that's going to go into the child. It's not going to do him well. What's going to happen? So what's going to happen is another thing that the Torah says in this week's Parashat. The Torah says, "Velo tetameu bahen." Do not defile yourself eating these things. V'nitmetem bam. V'nitmetem bam means, and you will become contaminated. But if you look at the spelling of the word v'nitmetem, it's missing the letter aleph. Tameh is usually spelled tet, mem, aleph. This word over here is missing the aleph. So the rabbis in the Gemara jump on that. Oh, missing an aleph, it's coming to hint us something. They say, don't read it v'nitmetem bam, read it v'nitamtem bam. You know what timtum means? In Hebrew, if someone calls you mitumtam, means you're closed, you're dull, you're thick, your brain is off, it's sealed, it's clogged. This is scary. Torah is telling you if a person eats things that he's not supposed to, not only does it become part of your bloodstream, Not only does it become part of your makeup, of your physical makeup, but v'nitamtem, it will dull your ability for spiritual growth. Hidush. It's a repellent for Kedusha. It will do such damage to the spiritual side of man that you will not be able to attain wisdom of Torah, and it can even cause, God forbid, a person to go off the path. I shake when I read this. I understand you're supposed to eat kosher. I always taught it's the laws, eat kosher like everything else. But now you're telling me, v'nitamtem, that if you have ideas to be religious, and if you have aspirations to get closer to God, and you come to class, and you learn, and you read, and you've invested time into the religion, if you're going not to follow the kosher laws, you're going to be clogged up. There's going to be a cork that is placed on the brain, and it will not enter, and it will not be understood, and one day it'll be misunderstood, and it'll serve you wrong. This is not said by mathematics, by the way. You can become a great mathematician while eating a cheeseburger. It's been proven. This is not said by science. There is no correlation between great science inventions, scientific studies, and eating bugs. This has not been proven. You can eat and drink anything you want and become the greatest historian. If you want to be a plumber or electrician also, you may eat to your heart's desires. But if you want to be a Jew, or better, you want to work on that spiritual side of Judaism, the Torah, which we're doing tonight, learning, and philosophy, being lax in kashrut will be counterproductive. It is poison to the soul. No sin has that dulling effect. V'nitamtem bam. We become mitumtamim. We're not kidding. Sounds quite drastic. I quote you what the Pri Hadash says. Pri Hadash, Rabbi Haskel de Silo. For Sephardim, the Pri Hadash is one of the major pillars of halakha. I quote what he said in Yoreh De'ah Siman Pe Aleph Seif Katan Chavav. Ulfi shebizmanenu zeh en nizharim me'inyanim elu, because he says unfortunately today many people are lax when it comes to eating kosher. Rov habanim, most of the children, yotzim letarbut ra'ah. They go off the path, the children. They follow bad culture. Verabim hem azeh panim shebador. They become the arrogant children of the generation. Ve'en yirat Hashem noga'at belibam, and the fear of God does not touch their hearts. Ve'afim yochichum al penehem, and even if you chastise, and even if you give them a rebuke, lav bar kibule musar ninu. They are so far gone that they cannot even receive musar. They are beyond rebuke. The Pri Hadash, in his generation, he blamed the delinquency of the children on the diet. Not that they were hyperactive because they ate too much sugar, or that they didn't have enough potassium, they weren't eating enough bananas. The Pri Hadash says because they weren't keeping kosher laws, so it affected the children. What an insight. This is one of the dilemmas that plagues modern society. What's going on with the generation? It's a generation of children that are out of control. A decadent society. Parents don't know what to do with their children. Children are chutzpah, they're insolent. Children have a lack of respect for elders. It's a rebellious generation. This is clear. And of course, we seek medical attention, psychological attention, therapy, and all different types of ideas how to save the generation. The Pri Hadash is telling you the first thing you have to do is, what are they eating? If you came to a rabbi and a father says, my kid, he's wild, I can't control him, you say, what are you feeding him? The kid takes out of his pocket some candies that have all sorts of non-kosher ingredients, and there's your answer. You know, before you can start working on the positive, you got to get rid of all the taref, otherwise it's not going to go in. So you're talking to a clogged up heart. You know, that's what the great rabbis that are involved in kiruv, in bringing back people to religion, about the Shuvah movement. One of their first modes of attack in trying to bring back the patient, they talk about kashrut first. For the sole reason that they don't want to waste their time. Because, you know, you're going to talk, and you're going to give a speech, and you're going to motivate, and you're going to inspire. And the guy comes out of the class, unbelievable, it's fantastic, what do I do? And he goes home to celebrate his inspiration, you know, over a bottle of French wine that's not kosher, over a piece of meat that's not kosher, and that's it. That just it undid everything that was just. Again, if he would have done another sin, it's wrong. But that's not as counterproductive as this. It clogs up the soul. There was a rabbi in the Gemara called Elisha ben Avuya. The Yerushalmi in Hagigah says Elisha ben Avuya went off the path eventually. He was a great rabbi, and he became a Mehalel Shabbat. Gemara tells how he used to ride his horse on Shabbat. That's equivalent to today. You're seeing a great rabbi riding a car on Shabbat. With the sunroof down, and he's waving to everybody, Shabbat Shalom. And he has a cigarette coming out of his mouth. That was Elisha ben Avuya. So the Gemara is trying to psychoanalyze. How does this happen? How's a man so great? He's the rabbi of Rabbi Meir. How is it possible a man can go from being one of the great Tanaim? We have Mishnayot in his name, Elisha ben Avuya. So the Gemara has many theories. But one of the theories is that his mother, when she was nursing the child, Elisha, she walked by a not kosher establishment and she had a craving and she ate, and that milk was subsequently processed from the not kosher food, and he drank from that milk as a baby, and that's it, the venom was in him. And that caused a blockage in the soul, and eventually that blockage, it just contaminated all his wisdom. The Gemara doesn't say that was the sole reason. You shouldn't say that, that's it, so you might as well throw in the towel. We all ate not kosher gum once in our lives. So therefore, pass, we're doing this, it's in the system already. The Gemara says 10 other things that he did. But that's one of them. He drank the byproduct of his mother's milk, and that's why the halakha says, although the milk is technically kosher, but it's going to zap you. It's going to leave a trace in you. And therefore the halakha says the child should not eat, and they learned it from Moshe Rabbeinu. And Moshe Rabbeinu would not nurse from the Egyptian ladies. And they didn't know it's a phenomenon. They never saw a child. Why does he want a nurse? He must be starving. So the pasuk writes that until they came to the advice, "V'karati lach isha mineket min ha'evriyot." Pasuk writes, "I'll find you a Jewish midwife." And then Moshe Rabbeinu's ready to nurse. Now we can only imagine, Has v'shalom, if Moshe Rabbeinu would have taken a little of the milk of the Egyptian midwife, say that's it. You can't be Moshe Rabbeinu. You can't reach that spiritual perfection if you ate a byproduct of something that's not kosher. It doesn't work together. Again, I saw a Hatam Sofer. Tonight, the Hatam Sofer, he's saying that the mind-boggling thoughts tonight. There's a teshuvah. They asked the Hatam Sofer a question. There was a child that was a shoteh. He was deranged, he had problems. So the parents want to know, could they institutionalize the child? But the place where he's going to receive his therapy, they're going to feed him nivelot utrefot. They're going to feed him unkosher food. But that's part of his healing. Hatam Sofer answers, mutar. It's permissible. He makes a condition that when the child reaches 13 years, he's bar mitzvah, then take him out. But as long as he's a minor, he's a katan, you can put him in such a place. And then he says, this is a blockbuster teshuvah from the Hatam Sofer. Mikol makom, he'idu kadmonenu. Our predecessors have testified, sha'al yedeh ma'achalot asurot b'ne'arut. When youngsters train themselves in eating things that are forbidden, mitamtem et halev, it closes the heart, umolid lo tevara, and it brings out a bad nature. Adayin ani omer, therefore I say, mutav sheyeh shoteh kol yamav. Let him stay deranged his whole life. Halakhically, it's permissible, but the damage that the not kosher food's going to have on him spiritually is not worth it. And therefore, better for him to stay in the physical state that he is and not dull the soul and the spiritual makeup. Amazing. I mean, they didn't take this theoretically, this concept. It's spiritual, the soul, the effects. I mean, this is halakha here. This was a ruling that he gave to somebody. I mean, they believe this as we believe every other theory in the Torah. It was halakha umurim ken. It was halakha lema'aseh. Hatam Sofer. I have a copy here of a famous correspondence from Maimonides, from the Rambam himself. There was a certain town that sent the Rambam letters asking philosophical questions on emunah, about God. The Rambam saw from the questions that there was certain bad philosophies floating around in the community. The Rambam's answer is classic. He writes, Libdok et ha-shochet. Go check the butcher. Go check the butcher. So they send back to him. What are you talking about? We asked you a question on Jewish philosophy, and you tell us to check the butcher. Are you a prophet? So he writes back, Lo navi ani velo ben navi. I'm not a prophet, I'm not the son of a prophet, but I have a rule. that philosophical problems in Judaism must arise from the intake of non-kosher food. Must be the butcher that you have is giving you not kosher meat, and all that taref that you're ingesting is causing you to have these heretical thoughts. Listen to an answer. Sure enough, they check the butcher and they find out that for 20 years he's been giving them meat that was less than kosher. But look what happens to the community. You don't just chalk it up, okay, we made some sins. Already now it's a community that questions God's existence because of their diet. That's the tumtum alev that we're talking about. That's the spiritual side effects. It's the spiritual downside of eating taref. There's a thought that I saw from Rav Chaim Palachi this week. It's a quick thought. He says that's why in the Amidah we have two berachot back to back to each other. We have the beracha v'ata kadosh, God, you are holy. Uchdoshim b'chol yom yalu chasela, and the holy Jewish people will praise you. And right after the beracha uchdoshim b'chol yom yalu chasela is the beracha v'ata chonen ladam da'at. God, you provide us with wisdom. And says Rav Chaim Palachi that the prerequisite for wisdom is Kedusha. Kedusha can only come through eating kosher. If a person wants to have success in wisdom, if he wants to understand the Gemara, he wants to understand the Tosafot, he wants to have clarity in the halakha, he wants to know, how come I'm not understanding anything I'm learning? How come I'm forgetting? How come I can't figure it out? The Jewish prognosis for such a problem would be the menu, would be the diet. Hence, before we can ask for da'at, we must remind ourselves that we must be kedoshim. It's the story of Antoninus and Rabbeinu HaKadosh. Antoninus was Marcus Aurelius. It's one of the Roman Caesars that became very friendly with our greatest rabbi, who edited the Mishnayot, the Rabbeinu HaKadosh, the Yehuda Nasi. They were lifelong friends. Antoninus was very compassionate to the Jewish people and sympathetic to the Jewish people and their causes. He used to have an underground tunnel every day. He used to sneak from the palace and go learn Havruta. He used to learn Daf Yomi every day with Rabbeinu HaKadosh. That's how fond he was to the Jewish people. He had a seder in learning. First seder he used to learn with Rabbeinu HaKadosh. So the Gemara again wants to psychoanalyze. Where does Antoninus have this admiration for Jewish people? What the Gemara's conclusion is? Again, amazing. Only a Gemara can answer such an answer. It's the last thing you'd answer. It's because when he was young, there was an episode where he was a baby and he started crying. So the Yehuda Nasi's mother nursed him for a few minutes. So the kosher milk that came from the kosher food of Rabbeinu HaKadosh's mother, that he swallowed a few drops, rather than being the venom and the poison, but this was a cure, was a healing. It was a spiritual awakening that was swimming through his bloodstream. Would you answer such a thing? Would Antonino say, if you asked Antonino, why do you love Jews? That glass of milk I had when I was a kid. But that's what the Gemara is saying. You want to even know more? On the day Sarah Imenu gave birth to Yitzhak, And all of a sudden the neighbors, they see a barren lady for 90 years, or they see a baby in the house. So the cynics, they said impossible. Can't be. Yitzhak is adopted. There's no way Sarah Imenu in her old age was able to bore such a baby. Any baby. So God made a miracle, and Sarah was able to nurse not only her son, but it says she was able to nurse all the neighbors' children. Now, unless you just gave birth, you don't have the ability to nurse. So that was a clear proof that she had indeed given birth. As the Pasuk says, Hinika banim Sarah. Sarah nursed many sons. But as a postscript to that Midrash, the Midrash writes, V'chulam nitgayiru. And all those that merited to nurse a few drops of milk from Sarah Imenu, they all converted. It's like Drano. It's able to unclog all the passageways to the soul, and they have a clarity, and their mind is open to the emet. So we've proven the downside, and we've proven the upside. I don't like to discuss the next part of the class, because we don't follow the Torah because of reasons. We follow the Torah ultimately because it's the law of God. That's reason enough to follow it. Even if the law doesn't make sense, and even if it defies logic, it's enough that God says follow the law. And ultimately the laws of kashrut are a hawk. Why scales and fins? There's no reason. Why do you need split hooves and chewing its cud? It's a hawk. There's no logic to it. That's the law. And I want to make it clear. That's why we follow the dietary laws, because it's the law. But you have to assume that Torah law is going to be consistent with other Torah law. Torah law demands us to be healthy. So God's not going to give us dietary laws that are going to contradict the law of being healthy. Hence we're forced to say that keeping kosher must be a healthy diet. Whether it's the trichinosis that is found specifically in pigs. There's a doctor in Germany, Dr. Sitlis, examined 6,329 pigs. 2,032 had the worm in it that causes trichinosis. Dr. John Balaji writes that 15% of pigs have this worm. So that's another added benefit. Even if they came out and said that, pigs are the healthiest thing, and whoever eats pigs is going to live to be 3,000 years old, and they'll never lose their hair, and, they'll be the most handsome people, we're still not going to eat pigs. The facts are, as they are today, that there are certain diseases that are specifically in those type of foods. I saw a newspaper article, it's an old article. There's probably 1,000 more better articles than this one. In 1924, it's a long time ago. Kosher laws were around then. In one of the papers in the United States, that a non-Jewish butcher in Florida had brought a shochet to come and slaughter an animal for one of his kosher customers. After the shochet slaughtered it, he checked the animal. Like every shochet, by the way, is a veterinarian. They check the animal after they slaughter it to make sure that it's healthy. And the Gemara discusses exactly what they're supposed to look for. And he saw certain things and he said, no, we can't eat this animal. It's sick. And the butcher, the goy, looked at it and says, what are you talking about? It's a healthy animal. You're making me lose money over here. I can't throw this animal away. He says, I'm telling you, it's not a healthy animal. They sent samples of the animal to Washington, to the different Food and Drug, whatever you want to call it. And after doing bacterial tests, they found tubercular microbes in the animal. And the butcher was amazed. Has this guy with a beard over here down to the floor, and he takes a look at it and he feels part of the animal, is able to see. So it's clear the laws of shahita. Law of shahita doesn't only mean the shahit slaughters the animal. He has to make internal checks to make sure that the animal is deemed healthy. There was a story recently in Mexico City. I have the story here of a lady that went to the doctor, and God forbid she had in her brain, I'm not going to say it right, cysticercus. Okay, it sounds serious. That's for sure. Doesn't sound good. It's a type of disorder in the brain, like a parasite, and the doctor was a non-Jew, asked the couple, did you ever hear about the Jewish people? So they said, the Jewish people? We're Jewish. Of course we heard about the Jewish people. So the doctor shockingly says, how is it possible that if you're Jewish, you got this disease? The only way you can contract this disease is by eating pork. They lowered their head in shame and answered in a very heavy tongue, Anachnu ochlim. We eat pork. So, again, not the highlight of the class. By no means. It's been said that lobsters can cause the most painful stomach aches and problems in digestion than most fish. We can imagine that. That we don't have to be a doctor to imagine that. Just by looking at them, you can get sick. So at this point, we've proven, number one, it's a mitzvah. Number two, it dulls us spiritually. Number three, it's part of us. It becomes part of our makeup, which is very hard to get rid of. And there's health benefits. I'm going to say a fifth concept. Hold on to your seats for this. This is for the Mekubalim that are in the class, for the Kabbalists. I heard many times from our former chief rabbi, Rabbi Kassin, Nacham Yaakov Katzin, Zichrono Levracha, was a master in the Kabbalah. I heard from his grandchildren. They didn't understand it. I explained it to them what exactly he meant, but they said many times when they would eat with him, after they would finish, there would still be some food left in their plates. So the chief rabbi would tell them, finish your food, there's neshamot that need to be fixed. And the kids didn't understand what neshamot to be fixed. What's the rabbi talking about? Rabbis of Kabbalah tell us that it is possible sometimes that souls come back into food, into kosher food, and by eating the food and becoming part of a Jewish person and making a beracha on it, that elevates the soul that's inside. So when you're sitting down eating a piece of steak, you don't know what's in that steak. That barbecue sauce can be more than what you think. The pasuk says in Tehillim, "Re'evim gam tzemeim." People are hungry and people are thirsty. Nafsham bahem tit'ataf. The food is enveloped with nefashot. So one of the berachot we make after we eat food is borei nefashot rabot v'asronam. We make a beracha borei nefashot because after we eat, we pray to God that the souls that were in the food, that were able to make the tikkun, sure you heard about the talking fish. I wouldn't mention such a story, but it's been in the newspapers, the secular newspapers. It was written in the New York Post. It was on WINS. So already, if you're going to believe the news, the other stuff, so now already we can mention it already. You know, if you're telling me Jewish press, you can say the Jews are making up stories. Yated de Iman, you know, it's a fish story. But already it's written in the news now, already. It's in not that they're any more honest, but I know people that know the fish store, and they know the guy, and the guy was in the store, he testifies, I heard the fish talk. Fish in Muncie, so the store started talking. Help me, I need a tikkun. The guy in the store started to scream in Spanish, El Diablo, the devil, the devil, he ran out. And they interviewed him, he says, yeah, he was scared. You know, the fish starts talking, he said, you don't want that to happen again. And the fishman dropped the knife, he was scared, he cut his whole hand. So they took the fish, and then they killed him, they turned it into gefilte fish, and they ate it on Shabbat. What are you going to do with it? That's the tikkun. Borei nefashot rabot. So that's the fifth benefit of kashrut. And now we discuss very quickly the misconceptions. The first misconception is the concept called glat. For Syrians, glat sounds like a very heavy word that has no part in our custom or our ritual. And it's actually a Yiddish word, glat. So you will hear many times a Syrian man saying, "Oh, we don't eat glat. We never ate glat. How do we eat glat? You think in Syria they had glat? Of course not. They didn't know glat. There's no such thing as glat in Syria. So they come here. So the glat, that's for the vuzvuz, that's for the Ashkenaz. We eat kasher. So let me tell you what exactly the evolution of this mistake is. Glat means smooth. That's all it means. It doesn't mean that the animal had peot. It doesn't mean that the animal has a black hat. That doesn't mean any of that. Glat in Yiddish means smooth. It means that after they slaughter the animal, they check the lungs. And they see if there's any sinew, any veins that are coming out of the lungs. If the lung is smooth, after they check it with their hands, so they call it glat. In Syria, it was called kasher because there was one standard. It's either the lungs are smooth or it's not kosher. So in Syria, in the butcher shops, it said basar kasher. Problem in America, they have two different levels. They have the glat, and then they have just the regular non-glat. And non-glat means that the lungs are filled with all sorts of sinew. For us, not glat means taref. So you want to basar kasher pirusho taref. So it was just a misconception in terminology. You're right. In Syria, you never ate glat. You ate better than glat. So when they came in, they started eating basar kasher. They were downgrading. That's the first misconception. It is our custom to only eat glat. That's why you have to be careful. You go to kosher delis. Kosher deli doesn't mean it's got to be a glat kosher deli. There are a lot of delis in New York and in Brooklyn. New York is famed for their delis. They're not famed for their glat kosher delis. So you have to be careful. Guys, I went to the 2nd Avenue deli, wherever you went. It's beautiful, pastrami, delicious. But it's going to be glat. If it's just basar kasher, that's taref. That's not kosher. Zion kosher. Hebrew national. That's taref, it's like boar's head. Not kosher. It's not even a little kosher. It's not like it's better than, it's not better, it's not kosher, it's finished. And don't ask me, so why they have it? That's another story. So that's the first misconception, the glot. The second misconception is cheese. You do hear a lot of people that say, I eat cheese out. According to the halakha, the cheese must be kosher, must have the hechsher. There is no heter to go to a pizza place and eat pizza with the cheese of the goyim. The third misconception is many people go to restaurants that are not kosher and they have a salad. You'll forgive me, and it's not going to sound right, but it's probably better off to have a hamburger. Why? A salad. What could be wrong with a salad? Fact, in every piece of lettuce, I don't want to ruin your appetite for dinner, but there is bugs. I'm sorry to say. I wish it wasn't like that. I'm not a big salad eater, but that's the facts. You can go look at it yourself. Next time you're in the fruit store, take a head of lettuce, go home, just put it to the light, and you'll see a lot of bugs. There's a lot of protein, don't get me wrong, it's very healthy, but Torah says you can't eat bugs. So there could be 20, 30 bugs on a piece of lettuce. So a person says, I'm mahmir, I'm just going to have a salad. Shema Yisrael. If you would have had a hamburger, you had one avon, but now you have a piece of lettuce, you have 20 avonot. One rabbi said, a guy had salad, and then he wanted to have an ice cream. He said, no, you meat. Zafar, you get all the bugs. So that's another misconception. Salad's a very dangerous item. It's dangerous if you don't check it. If you check it, you're fine. I have today checked lettuce and all that other stuff, but strawberries and all, you got to check food. And nobody thinks that they eat bugs. And nobody wants to believe that they eat bugs. But unchecked vegetables, in all laws, there's going to be bugs. So you think you're keeping kosher. You got mahmir and this food, that butcher, and this Bet Yosef, and all the other stuff. But meanwhile, you're ingesting all these other insects. God forbid. Number 4 is ingredients. Years ago, before they had kashrut symbols, we used to think we knew exactly how to read the ingredients. When we were kids, we used to take a candy. If it didn't say pig fat in it, so that's it. All the other chemicals, you'd eat it. You had no idea what anything else was, but you looked for, if it didn't say clearly, fat, so you ate it. Today you have to be just as careful. You can't go with ingredients. Stearic acid sounds harmless. Stearic acid is from the fat of animals. Magnesium stearate from the fat of animals. Pepsin. Pepsin is from the gastric juices of swine. There's one of the mashkichim told me today, even in flour, they said, what could be in flour? There's a certain additive that they put in flour. It's called L-cysteine. L-cysteine helps the flour rise. Originally, L-cysteine was made from ladies' hair. Might sound a little disgusting. That's kosher, but that's not a problem. The problem is that today they make it from the feathers of birds. It also might be kosher. The problem is when they pluck the feathers, there's blood. And that's mixed into the flour. So you're buying a regular thing of flour without a hechsher on it. You say, what could be in flour? It's just crushed up wheat. But if it has this L-cysteine in it, so you're in trouble. You don't know what you're eating. So you can never go with ingredients. Half the things we don't know. You ever know what gum Arabic is? You ever see that every single item you eat? Gum Arabic. What is gum Arabic? It's a PLO candy. What is gum Arabic? You understand what that Adush is over there? So that happens to be a kosher item. That's the sap that they get from the acacia tree in Africa. So they call it gum Arabic. But it just shows that you have no idea. If I told you it was, from a giraffe, you have no idea what it is. So you can't just go with ingredients. You need to have the hechsher. And the hechsher has to be reliable. K is not a reliable hechsher. We've said many times, K stands for Ka'an. K is... It's not. It's just the company that thinks it's kosher, but it has to have reliable kashrut on it. There's another misconception: that kosher restaurants are dirty. That might not be a misconception on second thought, but the truth of the matter is, today there really can be no excuse for a person not to be kosher. 20 years ago, you still had no excuse, but at least you heard a claim. It's difficult, there's no food, I want to eat out. Eating out is a big thing, it's a big social thing in our community. Today, what's the excuse? You have every denomination of food. It's American food, Italian, French, Mexican, Persian, Indian, Israeli, Middle Eastern. Tens of restaurants in the metropolitan area, upscale restaurants, low scale, takeout, fast food. Today, Baruch Hashem, there is really no excuse that a person could say, well, there's nowhere to eat. Why does he have to go to a taref restaurant? There's compatible restaurants today in the tri-state area, in the city specifically, in Brooklyn, that have just as good quality food that's kosher. So instead of ingesting tuma'ana systems, why not patronize these restaurants? Kosher products? Unlimited today. Whatever they have in the not kosher section, you can find it in the kosher section also. You have kosher bacon, and you have all sorts of marshmallows that were never kosher, and kosher gelatin and jellos. What's the excuse today? Today, the kosher section in the supermarket is just as competitive as the non-kosher section. People travel on the road. Today you can go to Hong Kong, there's kosher restaurants. I was there. You can go to Mexico, there's kosher restaurants. They say now you can go to Bentonville and they have kosher places to go. They have a kosher kitchen. So therefore, it became so easy, it became so accessible. Again, it's not an endorsement for Kosher Club Med and all the other types of, there the hechsher is only on the food, I'm assuming, not on all the other activities. But you see clearly today, we're lucky. We have the ability to have that holiness. One more point. The matzah. The Zohar writes on matzah, mechlad mehemnuta. They call it the food of emunah. According to the Zohar, if you eat the matzah on Pesach, there's some sort of magic. Call it what you like. There's some sort of spiritual beings in the matzah that are emunah enhancers. Last week we talked about emunah, yes? We talked about this conviction in God, and there's God in the world, and you got to know that there's God. Eating matzah strengthens emunah. So there's something in food more than the physical benefits. And the Gemara says if you eat olives, it's bad for your memory. A guy wants to know why he's forgetting everything. And every morning he has an olive sandwich. He's eating olives. He's half a can of olives every morning. But he doesn't know why he's forgetting. The Gemara says, on the other hand, olive oil is healthy and it's good for the memory. So there's a lot of properties in food that we don't even know about. Incidentally, the Gemara weighs in on its opinion of hard-boiled eggs. The doctors have great controversy. I don't know where they're up to. 1 year it's good eggs, 1 year it's bad. There's an ongoing machloket regarding eggs and its cholesterol, and it's good and it's low. They haven't figured out cholesterol yet either. It's another piece. It's like a paraduma. The American version of paraduma is cholesterol. And no one can figure this item out yet. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? And how do you control it? And is the eggs good for it or bad for it? But the Gemara has a very clear opinion. Gemara says, pound for pound, an egg, for its size, is in the healthiest foods. Hard-boiled egg. There's a lot of things in food over here that besides their physical qualities to them. So the Gemara is telling you, matzah is emunah food. Just like they say fish is brain food. That I can't guarantee. But they're telling you matzah does something for the emunah. So when you sit on Pesach, instead of making fun of the matzah, it's constipating and it's terrible and it's cardboard and all the jokes. Everybody has another joke to make about the matzah. But this food over here that you're eating, you're not the same person after you eat it. This is what God says. I elevated you. When you came out of Egypt, your ticket was changed from coach to first class. And because of that, your diet had to change. I didn't take you out of Egypt. I raised you from Egypt. Therefore, you became the king's gods. And therefore, there's a certain responsibility in being the king's gods. And therefore, you're a sensitive machine. You cannot tolerate what everybody else can eat. They can fresh and they can indulge, but the Jew can only have refined and a higher quality of fuel. Because like the Hatam Sofer says, we're not the same. The medicine that doesn't work for them might work for us, because it's a different creation. It's a different being. V'nitamtim. God forbid, it can be a spiritual clog. It can be a spiritual impediment on our soul. And just remember, the greatest sin that we're still suffering today, the sin that brought death to the world, the sin that brought struggling to make a living to the world, the sin that brought child labor to the world, was because two people ate something that they weren't supposed to eat. Adam and Hava ate food that wasn't kosher for them. And look at the avon, look at the repercussions, look at the consequence. Tonight we must make a new acceptance upon ourselves, a resolution to be more vigilant when it comes to kashrut. More vigilant when we put in our systems, to look for a hechsher, to be extra careful on checking the vegetables, to be extra careful on where we go out, and that our standards should be unyielding and uncompromising. And Azat Hashem, if that's the case, we will be Kedoshim. We will be Tehurim. Our heart will open up. And then we will be able to ask God for Chokhmah, Bina V'Da'at, and the well springs of wisdom will seep into our system. And through the Kedushah of kosher food, we'll be able to cling to Borei Olam and get closer, and our minds will be clear without any demented philosophy and bad ideas. And Be'ezrat Hashem, we will earn that first-class privilege that we gained at the Exodus of Mitzrayim. Shkul Shanim Rabot, Ne'imot V'Tovot.